This video is a mistake, but not for the reasons you're thinking. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and I don't have a layout or format or anything for this video. It's a bit of an older title. I'm covering Viticulture, Viticulture the Essential Edition with the Tuscany expansion, and I'm not doing my whole bullet point and format and like, don't like, player count, ease of play. I'll probably end up falling to a certain extent into some of those aspects, but it's an old enough game that I'm not going to go through the usual aspects, which also, when I say this video is a mistake, it means that there may be more rambling, there may be all jumping all over the place, and I may even end up starting the video all over again if I don't have a coherent train of thought. So, let's jump into this. Viticulture Essential Edition. I'm not heavily going to go into how this game plays because this is, like I said already, an older title, although there are new stuff coming out for the game, but I will talk briefly about how it plays. If you want to check out any other channels for tons of content around how this game is, there's lots out there. Viticulture is a worker placement game, but it's a worker placement game that takes place across a variety of seasons, which is an interesting different change of pace in terms of the game. Because you have your workers, you start the game with workers, you start the game with different resources and different things depending on the mom and papa cards you draw, and then from there you're going to use your workers, but you want to use them in different seasons. And we have the Tuscany expansion here, so we have 4 different seasons, we have all the things the Tuscany expansion adds and changes to the game, but that means as you place your workers, you're going to try to gather more workers, you're going to try to earn more workers and build more workers, train more people, but then you have to use them in various zones, and once you're done with summer or spring or whatever, as you go through these seasons, you're going to have to pause and wait for other players to catch up, which adds an interesting time mechanic to the game, and something else to be mindful of as you try to choose where your workers go, how many workers you have left for the next season, whether you're pacing to place them earlier or later across a variety of spots in the game. And the basic idea of the game, because past being a worker placement game, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Well, you're making wine, ultimately, mostly. For the most part, you're making wine as you deal with a ton of cards in the game. There's going to be 5 different card decks, again, assuming you're using the Tuscany expansion with the structures over here, but you're going to be using those cards and your workers to try to get as many points as possible as you make wine. You're going to have to go through a sequence. You're going to have to gather various cards from over here, from the screen deck over here, and plant them in your fields. You're going to have specific requirements about how those cards plant, and you're going to have to try to harvest those grapes. You're going to turn those grapes into wine. You're going to let the wine upgrade slowly but surely as you fulfill orders from these purple objective cards that have specific requirements of the types of wine, the level of wine, the agingness of the wine. Meanwhile, you're dealing with specific custom structures over here, a set of general structures you'll have in the game, and then the set of blue cards and yellow cards which represent all the fun of the game, at least for me, because they represent tons of different abilities and different ways to gather points, to trade this for that, to train extra workers, to give other players benefits and get points in return. A few other aspects are going on. You have your little star map down here where you're going to be placing stars in the game, trying to use those for various benefits, both in-game and end-game scoring. You have, like I said already, your structures that you're going to be building, which give you custom structures in addition to the regular structures that all have their place in how they build out your tableau. You're going to have custom workers from the Tuscany expansion, just different extra workers that cost a little bit more to train, but give you specific abilities, and you have a whole set of them, set of cards, so that they're different game to game. And that's basically at a very high level overview of what Viticulture and the expansion are bringing to your table. It's worker placement, you're making wine, you're trying to manage the placement, the ordering of what you're doing, and you're trying to do so as efficiently as possible to ideally win the game. And I really like this game. You see, this is an interesting one for me because it's a game that I avoided for a very long time. Viticulture is a game that looks dry as anything. Insert the usual 15 jokes about wine and dry and all that stuff, but it doesn't appeal to me. The art style, not bad, it just doesn't appeal to me, and it never really did. From all of Stonemaier games, if I could pick every single one of their games, I think the one that visually appeals to me the least is Viticulture. And so despite knowing that it had an excellent reputation, I avoided it for a very long time, especially in combination with the fact that Stonemaier games has always been okay for me. There have been some games that have really stood out, some games that I've really enjoyed, but for the most part, I would say when it comes to Stonemaier games, I have liked their games and not necessarily loved them the way they often are loved by many people. Wingspan was a good game, but one I didn't end up keeping. Scythe is a great game, and one that I did not end up keeping. Tapestry is a good game, and I did not end up keeping it. I still have Rolling Realms, I really like that one. Charterstone was excellent to go through. The ones that I liked tend to almost be the exceptions to a degree of their very popular, very well-loved games that they have so many of. And so when it came time to play Viticulture, I had it, I got it, because it's so well rated, it's worker placement, I heard good things about it, but I could not get over how dry this game looks. Insert 14 more jokes about wine and being dry. And I just pushed it off. And I pushed it off and I pushed it off. And in fact, I think the point where I finally sat down and got it played was I was driving down to Quacklope. The first time I was actually visiting, or the second time, I don't remember. And someone, one of my patrons or Discord members, I don't remember exactly which one, but either way, he gave me a call on the way because I gave my number out. And he called me and we smoothed a bit, we talked, and he talked about viticulture and he talked about how good it was. And I was like, I have to table my copy. And so I did. And I love this game. I really, really love this game. This game is an absolute blast to me. I really enjoy so many elements of what it's doing, and I couldn't really give you strong, compelling reasons as to why it's so good, other than just being very good at what it's doing, at least to myself. It's very good at the culmination of all the various aspects and how they tie together. The worker placement, in general, I like worker placement as a genre. That idea, that compelling aspect of placing down a worker, of trying to get the specific bonus you want, of being mindful of the fact that you want 17 different things, and you know that as the game round progresses, other players are going to slowly take the spots that you want. That's something you're always trying to be mindful of any worker placement game, and it's why I like the mechanic. And this game does it well. And it does so in terms of giving you extra workers, upgraded workers, you have custom workers, and it has different seasons, which adds a new spin and a new twist to worker placement, one that I hadn't personally seen done before. The original Viticulture had 2 seasons, Tuscany adds 4 seasons. I liked it both in the original, but I like Tuscany more. But it gives you that worker placement, and it gives you that pacing of the game where you have to think through what's going on, and you have to think through very carefully what you do. Hold too many workers for the next seasons, and you may find that the places that you could have gone to were ideal places to go to. One of the interesting challenges in worker placements, you have this tier. You have, I want to go here, 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 and here. That's a fun thing in worker placement. You know where you want to go, and you kind of have this execution tier. Well, if I lose this spot, well, I'll just go here instead. Viticulture doesn't have that. Because of the pacing of the seasons, you can't always go to your backup spot. It may be to the next season. If I don't get that spot in winter that I was planning on, well, I can't just go back to spring and summer and place my worker. My backup spot is already gone. So you have this extra mind game that you're playing with yourself of, do I try to go for my backup spot because at least I can guarantee it now, versus if I wait for winter, I may not even get to play those blue cards that I want to play. And so that's already one of the aspects that I really enjoy about Viticulture. The second thing is going to be the cards. I love the variety of tons of cards in the game, and variety does come with a bit of an asterisk in the sense that there's 4 card decks in the base game, there's the structures in Tuscany, and from the base game, I find that the green deck, which is all the various vines you can build, they're an essential component to the game, and diving for the right cards is a factor, but they're not exciting to me. They're fine, they do the job. Similar with the wine orders, same idea, an essential component to the game, you have to find the right wine orders to match up with the wine, make the right wine, but they're not exciting. They are functionally there, there are better and worse cards situationally, but they're not exciting to me. But the structures, I love the structures. They give you a different way, a different unique thing, the way you can place your worker or have an ongoing effect, a recurring revenue, some way or something that's going on in the game. We have a giant deck full of these structure cards, and that holds true for the blue and red decks, blue and yellow decks as well. And that's not even factoring in the fact that I have yet to even mix in the extra card packs. There's 2 extra card expansions that give you a whole bunch of extra cards. I've yet to mix those in. I absolutely will be. But we have all these blue decks and yellow decks and structure decks that give you unique extras, unique abilities, unique ways, and they're exciting to dive into. Every time you gather these cards and you find an opportunity and a way to play the card in a way that serves your strategy, often breaking the rules in ways that help you. Well, ideally help you, because why would you want to break the rules if it doesn't help you? But there's just the sheer variety of cards, and the fact that you will never see them all game to game means you're always diving in with a little bit of a nuance of which cards will I get this game, which cards will suit my strategy, which cards will help pursue what I'm trying to do. And there's a variety of ways you can pursue your strategies in Viticulture, which is another of the things I like. You have a whole bunch of general structures you have in the game, structures you can build to give you small little bonuses. Take an extra wine tour, show people your winery, you walk around, whenever you plant a vine, get an extra point. There's small little augmentations that you have in terms of the structures you can build and the way they play into your strategy that adds more to the tableau building element of the game. And then you can offend people by just going ahead and selling all your fields. You can go over here to the buy or sell one field in terms of cashing or funding your adventures in this game, as you literally just sell off your fields and pursue entirely different strategies in this game, because you do not ever have to produce wine in this game to win it. More often than not, you will, don't get me wrong, but there are other ways around the core primary engine. There's a lot of sub-aspect things you can do. There's cards you can play, there's structures you can build, you can trade for wine instead of harvesting wine, you can slowly level up those grapes, trade them in for the right order at the right time, you can manage the star map down here. There's tons of different things going on in the game, and the bonuses you can take, and managing turn order, the various things you'll get there, just going here, selling just wine in general, filling orders, is a ton of stuff you can do that will let you actually get the 25 points you need in the game, 20 in base Viticulture, in order to actually win without ever planting a single grape, because you've instead funded your economy from renting out your fields. And then if push comes to shove, and if that doesn't work for you, you can buy one of them back. It's not a locked-in decision. And you can start planting grapes late in the game, which might be too little too late, because you probably should plant them earlier if you're going to do so at all. But there's a lot that you can do in the game. You can start trying to fund orders early in order to get your recurring revenue moving. You can go ahead and build those custom structures. You can try to plan around harvesting fields, making wine tokens, building a variety of structures, doing every single thing, trading stuff for points. You can just go here every single turn and just keep trading other things for points. Draw cards, trading for points, draw cards, trading for points, because Viticulture has a ramping up to the game. You'll find yourself in those final rounds going to a point where you have 12 points, and suddenly 2 turns later you have 25. It has an escalation in terms of the way you start building and the slow pacing of getting things up and running, and then eventually cashing in. But I generally like almost every aspect of what it's doing, although I can see many aspects that would not work for you. To start off with, the art simply does not work for me. It doesn't. I don't find myself pulled in by this at all. I find it, again, dry. Insert 13 more wine jokes. It always goes down by 1 each time. But you have, it just, the board doesn't do it for me. The art doesn't do it for me. I wish this had a different, totally deluxified, I mean, again, it's fine. It's a matter of taste. It's not a matter of bad art. There's always that weird line where you can say something is bad art versus when you just think it's not to your taste. And I think that this is just simply not to my taste in the way the game looks. And there's other aspects to the game, things that may not work for me, things that may not work for you. You have the aspect that I talked about a second ago, where you have this slow ramping up at the end. Well, not slow, this fast ramping up at the end, where you get to 12 points, and suddenly a turn or two later, you're at 25, and you're like, how do we just play for an hour to get 12 points, and we play for another 10 minutes, and you got 25 points? How does that happen? And it just happens because of the nature of building out your engine, of building out your tableau, of having your wine prepped and slowly aging every single round, and then cashing in on that all at once in 3 or 4 orders, and boom, you won the game, or lost the game, but hey, the game's over either way. And that might not work for you, because it does give you a sense, a frequent sense. This has happened to me in nearly every game of Viticulture I've played, where very often the gap between the person in the lead and the person in last place, the gap is often large. Very often you'll have a few people who kind of cross the finish line at the same time. That does happen, but you'll have someone who's at 25 while somebody's at 14, and next turn they would have gotten to 25. You do have that pacing happen, and that can feel a little anticlimactic to end the game after an hour and a half and to feel like your score was doubled. Now, I know, and you probably know looking at your cards, that you are about to cash in, but it still can be a drop frustrating for others. You have the card decks. The card decks do have a degree of randomness to them. Now, one of the things I like is many of the yellow and blue cards offer you choices, decisions, so then they're often catered towards where you are in the game. You can do this or that. This will be better if it's early in the game. That will be better if it's later in the game, and they do give you that choice. And then even if that choice is not good enough, there are lots of ways you can trade in cards for other things. There are lots of ways you can get stuff out of the things that aren't working for you, so it's never truly a dead hand. But there are better and worse cards. There are cards that are situationally better for you. You can dive for the right objective cards or the right vine cards in order to get your engine up and running, and you may have to go back to that same pool a few times to get the cards that work best for you, or build out new structures to accommodate something that you didn't otherwise plan around, versus I might get the things that work for me. So there's definitely a degree of luck in terms of the sheer amount of cards you draw and the way that will play out in the game and how it'll help you. So there are aspects of Viticulture that I can see not working for others, but for me, I just find it rewarding. I find it a compelling experience where I sit down to play, I get my workers, I start with my bonuses, I get my mamas and papas, I do what I need to do, I gather my starting resources, my starting cards, my money, my workers, and then I sit there and I simply place a worker. Now I'm grabbing 2 cards, so I grabbed in that bonus spot. Very often you have these bonus spots in all these different areas that give you a thing for going there first. And then you go somewhere else, and you go somewhere else, and then we shift to the next season. And then you go, and I go, and we go back and forth, and I'm constantly getting bonuses, constantly thinking through how I want to do. I'm making sure to train my workers early, because I know that I want that, but then even if I don't get that, you might play a card that lets me train workers, but I'll have to give you a point, or you'll get a point if I do so. There's all these fun little aspects going on as you try to figure out how to get to 25 points as efficiently as possible, as fast as possible, and the variety in the cards is why I find myself continuously coming back to this one. The core engine is the same. The amount of cards, the variable aspects, the pathways to strategy, the fact that there's tons of expansion content, there's tons of decks of cards, there's a lot of different ways to modify or adjust the experience. You'll have custom workers that might be different every single game. There's enough reasons to continuously dive back into this simple, compelling, enjoyable, relaxing, and strategic worker placement game from Stonemaier Games. I really enjoy Viticulture. I guess as far as final thoughts, which is probably where we're up to in this video. I talked about some of the things I like. I talked about why it works for me. I talked about, some of the aspects you might be concerned about and why it might not work for you. I really enjoy Viticulture because of how good it is at doing standard things well. And I guess this isn't really a surprise, because this is a game that has been out for a while. It's been reprinted in different ways. It's had reprints, it had a second edition, it had a central edition, it had expansions, it had a whole bunch of content slowly added to the game. It feels, to its credit or to its detriment, depending on how you view it, it feels like an older game. This does not feel like a new title, a new spin on the genre. This feels like an older game that was simply done well, that had its place in board gaming history for a very specific reason, because it took a mechanic, it took a genre, it did so well, it did so differently, it added its own spin, it added tons of cards, like just piles full of cards and worker placement. Usually those don't go as hand in hand as they do in Viticulture. I can find titles that do it, but not necessarily to the level or to the extent that Viticulture does so. Then they added an expansion that kept it fresh, that added new life to the game, new decks of cards, new mechanics, splitting up the seasons, and it did so in a way that continued to keep this game compelling to people. This is, it has to be an evergreen. It's an evergreen game in the sense that it's been around for a long time, it is continuously talked about, and it's one that I, for a long time, pushed off because of those aspects, because it was an older game, because it came from a company that I think does great games, but I've had mixed results with, and because the art simply does not appeal to me. But I'm happy I dove into it. I don't know where it stands 5 years from now, 6 years from now. I don't know what's going to happen with this game. I don't know if it's a game I continue to dive into that long, because on the one hand, it offers a lot of variety to the experience, such that I am continuously engaged in it now. On the other hand, like I said already, it doesn't necessarily break the mold in any amazing way. It just does what it does well. And it's possible that over time I find that the patterns, the cards, I've experienced it all, I've seen it all, and maybe 20, 30 plays down the road, I'm ready to move on from Viticulture. But I'm not there yet. For right now, I'm still enjoying this one. For right now, I still like this one. For right now, this is a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It is a thoroughly enjoyable, well done, well executed game that the biggest complaint I can have against it, past the preference for art style or not, is likely going to come down to that luck aspect, because there is luck, especially at endgame. You draw an objective card that works for your strategy versus drawing one that does not work for your strategy. That could absolutely be the difference between winning and losing. And yes, in general, across the course of the game, there's mitigation. But when it comes down to that final draw, when it's between you and another player, that last draw can be a factor in who wins the game. So there is what to complain about here. But I find the experience immensely compelling despite that. As far as other game recommendations, if you want other games like this, Stone Age is going to be my go-to introduction to worker placement. Another oldie but a goodie, one that gives you simple, accessible worker placement in a way that is rewarding while managing resources, giving you a lot less going on, but a great way worker placement game. And if you're in it for the wine, if you're in it for the theme of the wine going on here, check out Vinous by Viticulture, that has a lot more depth, a lot more going on, a lot more interweaving parts in a much heavier and thinkier game. So we have the different ends of the spectrum here. We have a Viticulture, smack dab in the middle, and then Stone Age and a Viticulture game, Vinous, giving you the opposite ends of what more you're looking for from this game, from this hobby, from the theme, or any of that. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.